Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. If we could ask everyone to find their way to a seat, I think we'll get started. We do thank you for your patience with all of the hectic traffic downtown. We did give everyone a few extra minutes to be able to trickle in to join us today. So welcome to Miller Thomson. We're so delighted to have everyone here to host you in partnership with the Women's Leadership Network for an empowering discussion on achieving influence and creating a shared vision. Before we dive in today, I do want to take a moment to just recognize Laura for creating this network of established and emerging women leaders in healthcare, and for providing all of us with this space, both virtually and physically, to have authentic conversations, to support, inspire, and lift each other. Thank you so much, Laura. I see a lot of familiar faces in the room, but for those of you who don't know me, I am Karima Kanani. I'm one of the leaders of our health industry practice at Miller Thomson, and I'm joined today by my partners, Catherine Frelick. Catherine, are you there? Give a wave. That's Catherine. And Lisa Spiegel. And we are supported by a fantastic team of associates, Meg Berkowitz, Lauren Parrish, and Kristen Vandenberg. We've been advisors in the health industry for many years, and we've watched the sector evolve over time. We're in a time now of unprecedented health system transformation. The mandate to all of us is to drive patient-centered, collaborative care across the care continuum to, among other things, end hallway healthcare in our province. Healthcare organizations of all sizes and stripes are being asked to voluntarily find their way to collaborative circles and a common voice. It's a tall order. In a recent article in The Star, one hospital CEO commented, and I'll quote him, "We recognize that health team models isn't perfect. There's no silver bullet that will immediately end hallway healthcare. But we believe this is a time for courage, not caution." Today is about empowering each other to exercise that courage. The courage to lead as change agents, the courage to embrace the gray, and to shine a light path forward together among our old and new healthcare partners. And we have with us today a stellar panel of women who are trailblazing this journey across the province. And we welcome and are going to enjoy their insights on how to achieve influence and create a shared vision. And I'll turn the floor to Laura to get us started.
Check to see if, okay, I wanted to make sure there wasn't crazy feedback. So for those of you that engaged with the Women's Leadership Network before, what I'm about to say will be kind of repeating for you, but what has made this network so impressive to me is the collective power of all of you. And I always, every time we host an event, sit up here and you know, I'm kind of in awe of how hungry women are for this content and how willing they are to support each other. And so I think you all deserve a pat on the back for that. And what's phenomenal about this event in particular, when Karima had reached out to explore a possibility of partnership, is that I found out she had an all-female team, which I also feel needs a round of applause. Yeah. And not that I not to call you guys out in your own house, but if you want to come over, feel free. There's lots of space for you to integrate. So I think, you know, I've said this at events before, but I think there's a lot of power, not only in our collective presence as women, but in cross-industry collaboration. So it's really great to be in the room with our colleagues in law who obviously intersect with the work that we do very closely in the health sector. That being said, you didn't come here to hear me speak. So what I'm going to do is hand it over to our panel. You'll notice pretty quickly, if you haven't been at one of our events before, that this is a pretty candid and pretty fluid conversation, and we'll open it up to the group for questions as we go along. So please kind of make note. But do get excited because it's going to be a great conversation followed by lots of networking, snacks, and drinks for those of you who are willing to have one that I can't. Okay, so I'm going to pass, we're going to kind of go in order here. I'll pass the mic over and I'll let these ladies introduce themselves, although I'm sure they need no introduction.
Hi, everybody. So honored to be here and super excited that Laura had the courage to take the space to create the network and bring us all together. I think what's most important about our conversation today is how we all have permission to take space to make positive change, no matter our lens and no matter where we're at. So on behalf of us, so grateful. I'm Jodine Goldhar. I am at the Change Foundation. The Change Foundation is a charity, not-for-profit think tank in Ontario, the only think tank in Ontario that is an objective voice to help catalyze and support health system change. And we do it by really listening to what's most important to patients, caregivers, and the people who work in the health system. And I'm really honored to be here.
All right. I'm Andrea Barrack. I'm currently at TD Bank Group running their sustainability and corporate citizenship. I was previously in community healthcare and am currently on the board of Ontario Health, which I think might have gotten me an invitation to speak tonight.
Definitely just you.
But you can find out actually lots about me on LinkedIn anyway, so I thought I'd share 3 things that you can't find on LinkedIn. I put hot sauce on almost everything except for waffles. I used to be in Army Cadets when I was in high school and was on the rifle team, and I can juggle. And
Very
hopefully
impressive.
none of those will be required in the next hour. So.
That is impressive. I'm Jacki Schleifer Taylor, and I'm a physical therapist. I always say that. Proud mother of 3 children, and I invited my son to come tonight, and I appreciate that you did that, Denby. I know. I've been working in healthcare since 1992, and I'm currently the president of the Children's Hospital in London, Ontario. There are 4 academic acute tertiary children's hospitals in this province. I always say that because people don't know it. Mm-hmm. And I interact with a wonderful team of other clinical programs there as well at the executive vice president level. I'm so excited to be here. And I love Laura, and I appreciate the invitation to be with you all. Thank you.
Hello, Elena Pacheco. I'm the VP of Planning and Transformation at Markham Stouffville Hospital. Been with Markham Stouffville for about 5 years. Previous to that with Trillium Health Partners for 9. So a lot of healthcare experience. So honored to be here as well. Proud mother of 2 girls, one in her teenage years. So that's a learning for me for sure. But I hope you guys really enjoy it. Ask lots of questions. I'm an open book. Something you might not find, you'll never find on LinkedIn is I once kissed a soap opera star. There we go.
And then the conversation derailed. Okay, so we're going to jump right into it. So we do have 3 questions that I've floated to the panelists so that they could either prepare or not, whatever their style was. We'll go back and forth, and then I'll kind of take the temperature of the room about halfway through, see if there's a ton of questions. We'll just go off course and open it up for group discussion. So let's start with number 1, and I actually we'll flip the order, so we'll start down with Elena. How have you built influence over your career?
Interesting question. So when I think about influence over my career, I think it really changed and evolved over the years. When I first started as a manager at the Trillium, I think about really the trust that you got to build with your frontline team and really the relationships. So it's very different when you're managing a team and then building those trusts and those relationships. But as you evolve in your career and you start taking on bigger roles and different roles, it's harder to build those trust and relationships because you're dealing with stakeholders, you're dealing with board members, you're dealing with physicians, you're dealing with stakeholders in other organizations, and you don't get the time to really invest in build those relationships. So when I think about influence and how it's kind of evolved and thinking about my role now, I have to be even more influential with shorter time to sort of interact. So the example I can provide, which I think is a really good one as I think about that is, and you'll hear more about it through other examples as we talk today, but really thinking about a new build that we wanted to do at a rural hospital. And, you start off with a little network and you talk about a shared vision and what that shared vision is. But how do you then get other people around you to really influence other people to kind of make it happen or become a reality? And it's amazing that when you get to that point and people really believe in the vision and really want the vision to come to life, they will influence other people. So I would get these calls out of the blue and they'd say, I'm meeting with an MPP. Can you just shoot me some of the bullet points that you want me to put in their ear tomorrow about getting a rebuild for the hospital? And it's amazing to see that network really grow as you kind of develop your career and start looking at, how can I be influential with other people?
Jacki?
Okay, I'm kind of not going to answer the question because I loved getting this question or getting the questions in advance, and I thank you for that. But this one stumped me, and I want to explain sort of what happened in my mind when I saw this, and it was the first question. So it was kind of like, oh gosh, I don't even want to read the second and third one, but they were easier. This question stumped me, I think, for two reasons. One, it asked built influence, and I have no consciousness of that. None. That's just the truth. I think the first time in my professional career that I felt someone said to me that I'd influenced them or I knew I was influencing something, it was such a epiphany, to be honest. The second thing I think is I wondered what influence meant really. And then I did Google it. And I know I'm influential. And then that took me to a place of, I love your comments, Elna, and just why am I influential at certain times? And for me, I think it's because personally, I've never been engaged in something that I wasn't excited and passionate about. Mm-hmm. And then I've really never thought I could do anything on my own, ever. So I found other people who were passionate and excited about it. And then we collectively made change. But I would also comment that, and I mentioned the 4 acute tertiary children's hospitals because historically they've been the president and CEO or the president has been male. And that's no different today. I've been in my role for 4 years and I'm a woman, of course. I identify as a woman. And if you haven't noticed, I'm a Black woman. And I find in this negotiation phase, which I was just sharing with one of my good colleagues in the sector, I have to influence differently. I have to create the space at the table differently because the stereotype, I can't be, first of all, I'm always myself. But I find that I do these little things like create the space of comfort for those men, for me to tell them, you're wrong. But I don't say you're wrong. I have to bring them to the realization that they're wrong because that's just what I do. And it's so automatic. Sometimes I just want to say, hard no, wrong decision. But I don't because I feel inherently that is, whereas if I was at a table with women, we could stomach a hard no. Come on, Jodine. We just get over it. But I just wanted to comment on that. So I loved this question because I think women create influence in such a different way of necessity because there is nothing more powerful than an influential woman.
You can all tweet that.
Right now, I've got my phone in my bag, but I want to talk about it. Actually, this is my favorite question. Oh, and but similar. But similar to I think your comments is. So I'm new to the bank. I've been there about 2.5 years, and we have 86,000 employees, and we have almost 2,000 executives. And so the need for influence has never been greater in my life. And so for the first time, I've actually been a lot more conscious about it. And in fact, one of the things that I've been working with an executive coach on is really understanding how to be purposeful about influence. Because I do think it was something that I always felt came naturally and that I thought I did just as a part of who I was in the past. But because I've really had to scale it up, I've been thinking a lot about it. So one of the things, this is going to sound super hokey, but that my coach said, what's your sort of self-definition kind of your leadership? And so we played with various statements and what that would look like. Never meant to be shared because they are kind of hokey, so please don't tweet this part. But, one of the ones that we sort of landed on was, I'm good at what I do and I care about you. And so it sounds a little cute. So I'm going to break it down, what that really means. So I'm good at what I do is about competence and being comfortable with your competence, because that is what builds credibility. And you can't be influential if you're not credible. So really have to be clear in that space. I care about you then is I both understand and will help take care of your interests. And that builds loyalty. And it's that combination then of credibility and loyalty that does allow you then the space to be able to influence, because people feel like, I've got your back. It's not about me. I get what you care about and I'm on it. And not only am I on it, I'm competently on it. So it's not just words, right? It's something that I can deliver on. So that's why I love the question.
That's a pretty brilliant answer. Oh, wait.
Trying to intimidate, Lord. No, it's good. Oh, thank you. I looked at it from a different perspective. I went back. First, let me tell you that I'm not at the Change Foundation by accident. I approached the CEO and I asked for a role. And I wanted the role because I really believed in what the Change Foundation stood for in Ontario. And I really believed that the Change Foundation aligned to my values and was the platform to help catalyze very radical change in Ontario. And how did I get to a point that I was confident enough to approach the CEO and create a role? Well, I'm going to take you back on a bit of a journey that sort of the pivotal moments. The first has to do with school. When I went to school when I was younger, I always did poorly in school, always. I always lacked confidence, and I never felt smart. So I barely made it through, all the way, including by the skin, getting into university. And when I was in university at my first degree, I barely made it out, conditional acceptance to continue. And I really had a crisis of conscience. And then, by some miracle, I switched schools and I got into women's studies. And all of a sudden, my entire world pivoted because I found something I was passionate about, which was around equity and hearing voices of people who haven't been heard, and recognizing, if we work in shared purpose, how the world can change. And I went on to earn 5 degrees. And I don't care so much about the degrees, but I do care about the fact that until I was connected to my passion, I couldn't work in purpose. And if I didn't have a purpose, I couldn't influence change. The second is, I was working at Baycrest, and this whole front row is from Baycrest. I grew up volunteering at Baycrest because I always had a passion for being around older adults. And I went from volunteering to being on staff. Fast forward, 2 of my degrees are in social work. Thought I would practice clinically, didn't practice a day in my life. And the reason is because I could always see the gray in between. So when I was talking to older adults or their families, I could hear how they were experiencing the system, and I couldn't get that out of my head. And that's all I could see in my head. I couldn't concentrate just one-on-one. It was more the systemic pieces. And when I went back to school at the Institute for Health Policy Management and Evaluation, and I started working for the chief executive officer, and I had an opportunity to say to him, you have all these external consultants coming in, but I have a bit of know-how. Why don't you let me be our internal consultant to the organization? And he said, if you can sell it to the senior team, you can have it. I sold it to the senior team. I got the role. And my first project was to redevelop our supportive housing. And so I got to travel all over the States for 3 months to learn about supportive housing and assisted living. And then I got to work for PricewaterhouseCoopers for their healthcare practice and learn how to be a consultant. Came back, got to lead this huge project, got all these kudos from the board, from senior management. We implemented it, but I failed. And this was my lesson. The woman who was running the supportive housing, I never engaged her in the process. I didn't look at how she could co-design the answers with me. I took my positional authority and power and drove change. And to this day, despite what other people may think of my accomplishment, I know I failed. But I learned because I've never done it again. If I can't co-design the change, then I can't influence the kind of positive change that I think I can help. And the final piece I want to say is that my passion is integration, connecting up the silos and helping us work in shared purpose so we can achieve something greater as a result of us coming together than we would individually, as individuals, teams, organizations, or a system. But there's only one common voice that helps us do that, and that's the experience of people and their families, patients, clients, caregivers. And once I reoriented to understand that that is the fundamental shift that helps bring us together in shared purpose, my ability to influence change skyrocketed. And so how to take space, how to move from positional power to what I don't call, but Jeremy Pivens and Henry Timms calls new power, where you democratize change and share power to drive change. And when you listen to the people where health and social care matters most, people and their families, is how my greatest lessons for how to influence change.
I love, did I do it again? Can you guys hear me?
No.
What about now? Oh, yep, we're good. Okay, that's a stark difference. So one of the things I love about every time we have a panel is that, I mean, I try to come up with simple questions that aren't always simple, but I love that everyone interprets them differently. I love, Jacki, that you unpacked it and picked it apart in a productive way, because one of the things that I have heard as feedback that's most valuable about these experiences is, everyone thinks differently, everyone experiences things differently. So having different answers to that question just validates that everyone's experience is relevant. And it allows you to connect with the panelists and yourself, which also feels kind of like a hokey statement, but in a way that hopefully empowers you to pursue whatever it is you want to pursue. A couple of kind of points I'll summarize as we segue into our next question that warrant repeating, but that come up every time we have a panel, no matter the topic. This notion of collaborative leadership or new power that, I'll save you all from a quick little nap and won't go into the science, but that women are very well positioned to do because of the way we lead from beside instead of in front, empowering others around us. And to Andrea's point, being self-aware of what your strengths and competencies are, and then having the courage to surround yourself with people who fill in the gaps to really drive things forward. If you take anything away from tonight, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the book Start With Why, but it's like, for me at least, and it sounds like I might be speaking for the experience of the panel as well based on your answers, that clarity and purpose comes from defining what that why or that passion is, and it can evolve over time. You can have a couple of parallel passions, but sometimes people will say to me, like, how do you run this network, off the side of your desk in addition to a full-time job? And I'm like, because this is what gives me energy. Like this, I would rather, if someone wants to pay me to do this full-time, I will be right there, but like, this isn't work. And when you find your why, it just like, there's to a certain extent, not without effort and energy, it just comes. And I think that I hope that resonates with a lot of people. And if it doesn't, happy to have as many conversations as I need to about helping people navigate to what it is that lights their fire. So once our fire is lit, ladies, what is your roadmap for creating a shared vision around that purpose or that why? We can start anywhere. I feel like Jodine's like itching.
Oh, I am? I'm happy to start.
Yeah, let's work our way back down. I just know how fired up you get when we talk about passion and purpose. So now you got it. You got to run with it.
Okay. Well, first, I just want to share a couple things. And I think being vulnerable is really important, because when I started being vulnerable and being myself, that's when I started to have more what I would call success in my career. And I don't care about position. I care about impact. And as it happened, when I started really caring about impact, my position started to change, but I was never driven by position. And there's a couple things that have happened that I think influence the roadmap for creating shared vision. The first is our own mental models. So especially as women, and I meet with a lot of women one-on-one, teach at the university, we have sometimes a crisis of performance gremlin or self-talk that holds us back. And I'm no exception. I have had a lot of time in my life where I doubt myself or I don't give myself the push to go forward. But there are a couple things that happened, and I think it's no coincidence that I have this amazing opportunity to speak to you today at this stage in my career. I'm 49. I have a lot more, I'm more grounded than I've ever been, but it took me a while to get here. And these are some of the fundamental shifts that then help with shared purpose. The first is I kept thinking that I had to wait for others to give me direction or tell me what to do or how to create change. And when I was able to shift my mental model and know I don't need permission, of course you work with people and you need shared purpose, but we have permission to take space to create positive change no matter our role, no matter our role. And when that shifted, that was huge for me. I was having a conversation with somebody who worked at Facebook, and I was telling him that I'm very involved with integrated care, and I'm part of the International Foundation for Integrated Care, and I go to all these international conferences. And he said to me, why are we going there? Why aren't they coming here? I'm like, shit, why aren't they coming here? So in October, we are bringing the first international conference on integrated care to North America, 1,400 people, 60 countries. All that was a mental shift. And there's many in the room that will be part of that. The second is, okay, I had a passion around integrated care, but I also care about not the what, but the how. And how we make change, sometimes I'm like frustrated because, and this isn't criticism about quality improvement and PDSA cycles and the whole quality improvement methodology and framework. There's a place and it's important. But we aren't looking at social movements for change as a way to seed movements that allow for a radical improvement. And so I started to look at what are the social movements and who's inspiring me. And 10 years ago, I was like posting Helen Bevan stuff all over my office or like beside my bed for inspiration. Hands up if you know Helen Bevan. Helen Bevan is the Chief Transformational Officer for the National Health System. But what's more incredible is she's the #1 influencer of health and social change in the world. She runs something called the School for Change Agents. It used to be called the School for Healthcare Radicals. Just 2 months ago, she had 15,000 people from all over the world talking about leading from wherever they're at. And when you talk about creating shared vision, I really wanted to understand the how. And we talk about mentorship and how to support each other, which is so critical, but we also have to find the people who inspire us. And I found the people who inspire us, and I started to follow her. I know, creepy, but I needed some inspiration. Sometimes when you're working with the same people all the time, as much as you love each other, you also have to step out and look around. Barack Obama, in his first year in office, interviewed by Oprah, he said to him, what would you do differently? And he said, I would have looked up and looked out, because he's so down doing the work. So I was trying to look up and look out. And today, fast forward, I'm Helen Bevan's first international fellow. And this is a moment that I want to share with you and feel proud and not embarrassed to sort of put that out there. Because shared vision is if we're working in our own purpose and we're connected to what matters, then we're able to facilitate a process to bring people in shared vision. I'm going to stop with one more thing, which means that I no longer see my role or put pressure on myself to be an expert in anything. Even though if you ask me about integration, I have a lot to say. Instead, I see myself as a convener of change. And as soon as I switched from having to be an expert to moving to a convener to help create space to move change, the pressure was off me because I don't have to have the answers. We have the answers when we come together. And we've been able to sort of skyrocket some really meaningful change in Ontario.
Awesome. Move down the line to Andrea.
Sure. Before I get to shared vision, actually, I just want to pick up on something that you talked about. It's sort of looking a little bit outside the usual suspects in terms of inspiration. And I'm midway through a book right now called Range. I can't remember the author. It's actually a sports writer. Mm-hmm. And his byline of this book is called Why Generalist Will Rule in a Never Specialized World. Yeah. And it's really the idea that we can't really innovate or creatively solve problems if we're so narrowly focused in what it is that we do. And so we really need to look at other sectors, look at other kind of people, and bring that all in. So I'm a huge believer in that. Not the question you asked, but I got excited about that. Except for in golf. Tiger Woods is the anomaly. Because you really do need to hit that thing exactly the same every single time to make it go like that. Every other sport's not the same. Nothing else in life is like golf. So shared vision, I kind of chuckled when I thought about this because, just being real, there's sort of the ideal shared vision is people come together and co-create something. How I've often experienced shared vision is I have a vision. I want you to buy in. Yeah. And so I think the roadmap looks a little bit different depending on which way. And sometimes for expediency, you kind of need to then get buy-in. So it's not necessarily wrong, but there's a few things that I think I've noticed as being important in doing that. One is really being clear about the value that you're going to create, right? And it seems like a simple thing, but whatever it is that this thing is about, what's the value? And trying to build consensus on that, because that's sort of the foundation for what's going to be the aspiration. I think the second thing is the idea that if it's positively framed, it's easier to get buy-in than if it's negatively framed. Mm-hmm. So if you can build on what people are proud about to then set the aspiration, it's a lot easier to get buy-in than wagging your finger and saying, well, we've screwed up for 5 years now, so now let's get our act together and do something right. So trying to build on success, I think, is the key. And then the third thing is, vision is often thought about, people, organizations have a vision statement, and really one organization's vision statement could be swapped with another, and they're so broad, and motherhood, no one's going to disagree, and no one's actually going to execute either. So I like to take vision down a little bit to something you could actually do in your lifetime with the resources that you have. And in that is sort of like the idea is that you want to be specific enough that you know what to do next, but not so detailed that you don't have room to be agile. And there was a quote that actually, I wish there was a woman, I was at a sort of group similar to this, and she said it, and then I wrote it down. I didn't attribute it to her, so I apologize for that. But she said, I've always found that you need to have a vision, but hold it lightly. Mm-hmm. And I think that's sort of that idea that we are in this rapidly changing world all the time. And if you get too focused and stuck on something, then you're not going to be able to not only adapt to change, but even see that it's out there and where you're at.
I just want to fail again with technology.
Do you want my...
No, I'm just going to put myself through the awkward frustration of figuring it out.
Except it's not
I know. I'm waiting for it to go green. Okay, I might just sit here.
Yeah. She's like, yeah, get on with it. So I just want to pick up on something, Andrea, you said around the generalist versus specialist. For those who are comfortable, a show of hands in the room, how many of you have felt like you're on this race with fictional other people, or maybe people that you work with, to become an expert and that you need to know more and you don't know enough? Yeah, the rest of you are lying. So I constantly, it doesn't matter where I'm at in my career, I always feel like I need to dive deeper down this hole. I need to become an expert in something. And maybe those of us that are, PhD trained or scientists in the room sometimes feel that way because, and that's the only experience I can speak to, that's kind of the way that the educational system, trains you. But I hope this next fact brings you as much comfort as it brought me. So because I have a questionable memory, which I'm going to blame on my pregnancy, I might have the stats a little bit off, but if you look at senior executives and CEOs, it's 80% emotional intelligence, so how you interact and deal with other people, your own self-awareness, and 20% technical skill. So you're all good. It doesn't matter. It's surround yourself with technical. If your aspirations are to lead on a greater scale, surround yourself with people who fill in the gaps that you don't feel you have, which may be real or imagined. And don't worry about the technical proficiency if that's not your path. I find that I can speak for myself and, some other women who are either friends or colleagues, that we spin our wheels feeling like we need to get that depth, only to realize that that depth may not be serving the path that we're on. So, to each their own with your professional development and career journey, but know that whatever your definition of expert is, where you think you need to go, the people that are around you probably have a very different definition of your level of expertise, and you're good. Just own what you know, and you'll be surprised with how much influence that will create. Okay, with that, I'm going to pass it over to you, Jacki.
I don't even know what to say now. This is great. You're making me want to go off and say something a little different.
Do it.
Okay. And apologies, Sarah, who was on my lovely team in London, and she's here tonight, but she's heard this before. I in my role, and over my career, I've had to have a lot of exposure to resumes, CVs in the hiring process. And in London, we hire chair chiefs, which is the highest leadership role. And so I don't know, in the past 6 months alone, I probably have reviewed about 80 resumes, CVs. And I'd say, oh gosh, if it was 80, I'd say 75 of them were male applicants. And then I had the experience about 3 weeks ago where someone I don't know called me and asked me if I would review their resume for a search I was not on. And it was fascinating. She came to London to see me, and she lined up her resume CV with the job requirements. And I think she would have had 9 out of 10 of the requirements, then something. And her question to me was, do you think I'm ready for this? Mm-hmm. And what I found fascinating is that of those 75 CVs, I can tell you maybe the average qualifications, if you went, line by line, would have been 5, 6. So I think there's something, just what you said, Laura, something about women that think you have to be 10 out of 10 the expert before you move forward with something. Nobody is that good. That bar is not attainable, and there's no point, because you surround yourself with brilliant women or brilliant men or brilliant whomever, because you don't have to be everything. I just wanted to say that's been my experience, and I do it myself. Ellen and I were talking this afternoon, just this evening, saying, oh, it's kind of like an imposter syndrome. You feel that you're good, but then you doubt that you're good. We're all good at something. Mm-hmm. Definitely. The other thing I just wanted to say is I did think about shared vision and the fact that it boils down, in my experience, to a couple of things. One is that to make a roadmap, whether you are sort of forcing it because of circumstances or co-creating it, one of the things I found is that people tend to have a challenge finding out what shade of green we're talking about. So if there's a vision that's put out there or co-created, and I've gotten through a process where it was collaborative and wonderful and everyone was excited, but then we sat around and realized we were really a little off. Someone was talking about chartreuse, someone else forest green, someone else lime green. And you'd be surprised how important that nuanced difference is in what is such a high-level thing, a vision, because you do have to break it down and make it real for people. And I would say about roadmaps that the challenge in making visions vibrant and actually live is helping people find themselves in it. Because a vision that isn't a little part you isn't your vision. If it sits just with 3 people or at the organizational level, that's why they don't live. So as leaders or any level in a hospital, which is what I know, the tricky thing is making sure that everybody has conversations where their piece in that roadmap is understood by them to the exact shade of green.
I'm going to add to that. I'm going to talk about not creating a shared vision, but sort of a misalignment or a challenge you can have when you don't have the same vision. So whether it's a different shade of green or whether you're completely misaligned, how that can really create a hiccup in how you move forward and even getting the buy-in. So I'm going to go back to really trying to create this shared vision that we had for our campus in a rural area. And, I'm going to I'm going in and I'm thinking, I'm going to look at the data and the data is going to tell me what I need to do. So I go in and I say, oh, there's not a lot of acuity happening at this hospital. Maybe 2 cases overnight. Not a lot of people walking in. Why do we even have an ED? The ministry is going to laugh and say, this is an urgent care center. It's not an ED. And I remember when I reviewed that data, I said, I'm going to call the ministry just to confirm that I'm right. And I spoke with the administrator. I said, I'm looking at the data and, I'm trying to create this vision for this campus. And I noticed that the acuity is really low. And I think it's kind of an urgent care center model. And they said, well, yeah, we wouldn't grant you an ED over there. And I said, okay, that's what I thought. Like, you're reconfirming my thinking. And I went to the physicians and I went to the community and I said, we're going to build an urgent care center. How do you think that turned out? Mm-hmm. Yes, not very good. So the key point here is, when we talk about co-creation and we talk about a shared vision, it's that engagement that is so important. Sometimes we're driven to data and the data is going to tell us the story. But then when you started hearing the stories about what about the person who walked in with chest pains? Okay, it was one person that night, but if they had to drive 45 minutes to a hospital, they would have passed away. What about that person, Elena? Did you think about that? And I think sitting back and really looking again at the evolution and talking about influence and talking about shared vision, it's really listening, actively listening and understanding the stories. And at that point, I was influenced. They influenced me and they got me to believe into the shared vision. And I'm so proud because last week, after 3 years of working on this project, we finally got the announcement that we're moving forward. So I'm really happy for that community.
I just had it green. I'm so used to
What shade of green?
Yes!
That's the key.
Okay. Well, I had it.
Can I say something, Laura?
Of course.
In follow up, Elena reminded me of myself not that long ago. I shouldn't have started that way because I'm going to say something negative and it's going to sound like weird. But what I was going to say is about influencing again, because I'm learning as you're all talking. There's something about influencing only from a space of being viewed as a leader. And sometimes, and recently, very recently for me, I recognize that the people in the room were viewing me as an expert. So there's a really great research paper that talks about the fact that regardless of your title, people just sort of put you in 3 buckets, one of 3 buckets. They either see you as an expert on a topic, very, in some circles, under some circumstances, very influential to have that lens at the table, or you're seen as a manager, person that can do, get it done, or you're seen as a leader, which doesn't have to have content expertise. And I just am reminded that you have to know how you're being received at different tables at different times around different topics and navigate that shift. Because it's so important sometimes to know what space you're being viewed from. Mm-hmm. I did this horrible thing 6 weeks ago. I'm not going to talk about it.
Because it's still probably
it's still a little raw. Yeah, I'm learning.
Yep.
I'm learning.
I'm also learning. I'm done. Every time I have a green, I'm like, guys, I'm good to go. And then I start to talk and it doesn't work. So 2 things I want to pick up on. Jacki, what's hilarious to me about your statement about reviewing resumes and CVs is how you quoted the literature perfectly without knowing it. And those of you who have, I can't remember if it was the last event or the one before where I said this, but I'm going to repeat it and now maybe make it the tagline of the network. Men apply for a job when they meet 50 to 60% of their criteria. Women only apply when they meet 100.
Yeah, 100%.
And so every single woman in this room loves where they work, but when you apply for your next job, you apply when you meet 40 to 50% of that criteria. That's right. And
I've never been qualified for any job that has been given to me. I'll admit it.
Being on the end of drafting those postings, unicorns meet all those criteria.
Yeah.
Like no one does. And so sometimes realizing that, sometimes I'm almost frustrated at the process. And so when I put in all those criteria, it's not these are necessary. It's can you see yourself in pieces of what we're asking for? Maybe you have this degree. Maybe you have one that's kind of similar. And so part of the value for me, for what it's worth, is your ability to craft your narrative around that posting. And so I care more about how you sell yourself. I don't like saying sell yourself, but how you package yourself and how you present yourself. Then the checklist. I don't usually look at someone's resume much. I maybe skim their cover letter, and it's all about, because there needs to be a process by which you bring people into interview. But I just care about the person. The rest is trainable. And you know what? If I take that same approach when I apply for positions, and if the person I'm applying for disagrees, then I probably am not going to fit in that environment anyway. And so that's at least how I approach things. I forgot my other point, which happens to me about 87 times a day right now. I'm just going to pause for a second. So we still have time left for the panel discussion, but how many of you, if we opened it up for questions, would have a question? Okay, that's not that many hands. It's like 4. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I won't do an abridged version of this. We'll ask our last question, and then we'll open it up to the group, and then hopefully just have a conversation back and forth. And to be clear, in case it's not, your questions do not have to relate to achieving influence and creating a shared vision. It can be about anything you want to ask these women or myself.
How many balls
but I imagine, yeah, right. What kind of hot sauce do you like? Why not waffles? Okay, so we'll go to the last question, and then literally when we open it up, it's just an opportunity to learn from each other. So you can even crowdsource your question and post it to the whole group. So the last question I'm going to ask the 3 of you are, what are the key levers, this is intentionally vague, that can drive successful transformation? So you've touched on a couple, but part of the fun is letting people kind of interpret the question as they will. I'm actually going to maybe start with Jacki, if you're okay, and then we'll work our way back towards me and then finish with Ellen.
Okay, what was the question again? Can you repeat it? No,
I sure can. What are the key levers, see, I can't even read, that drive successful transformation?
Okay. I had a different answer before I talked to Elena, and I was kind of hoping she would start so I could springboard on it.
Then let's do that.
Oh, okay.
No.
You go.
No, okay.
You go.
It's interesting. I was thinking about, we had a brief conversation, and I was thinking about how transformation happens. And maybe I will say, not to steal your
Go ahead.
wonderful perspective, I think it only happens when people are genuinely excited about where you're going. And if you don't build that excitement, you're not going to get there. And what's interesting, and how you build it, and I'll give you a tangible example, and someone said it, I think it was you, Andrea, cannot be from a negative space. It just can't. I don't know how many people are actually motivated by a pressure point or negativity. At my hospital, not the Children's Hospital, but the London Health Sciences Center, we just achieved exemplary standing in accreditation. And that's after 13 years of being accredited with report, very public. I'm going to just say it like it is. And what's interesting was I was given this file. My job changed on Monday, by the way. New portfolio 5 times in 4 years. I'm excited about that, sort of. But one of the things was I was handed this file because at the time I had made one comment at the executive table of 12, and it was this: well, aren't we going to get exemplary this time? So this is going from the lowest rating to the highest rating. And the CEO of the day, we have a new CEO now, said, you essentially put your hand up to lead this. And I did. And what I will tell you was, it wasn't me. It was talking to all of the physician chair chiefs, talking to every executive, and understanding why they felt that we couldn't accomplish this transformation. And what I learned through those conversations, because nothing gets done without conversations, in my opinion, was that they viewed it as a task, not an aspiration, not something that our staff deserved, our patients deserved, they deserved. They saw it as a bar they had to meet instead of, something that was going to transform the culture at our organization. And I'll tell you, when we accomplished that, and we did not cut corners, we partnered with Accreditation Canada and asked them to load in all of the standards possible and cover every portion of the hospital. They were on site for 6 days. It is a giant or multi-site organization. But people cried when they announced that. That's how passionate it was. And that was because they wanted something positive to happen. It was so beautiful. Yeah. Anyway, you now.
So just to build on that thought, I truly believe that you have to be authentic and you have to really build that following in terms of getting people excited, seeing that vision, moving it forward. And it's not an easy thing to do. It really isn't. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of engagement. But I think once you build that excitement and just the accreditation, like that's amazing. Mm-hmm. You don't set your bar. Like I really do think, and again, I think this is like pressure that we put on ourselves. We set this bar of transformation. Like that's a big word. When I think of transformation, I think you have a cat and you're converting it into a dog. Like that's transformation, right? Not change. Change management is change management, but transforming something, that takes a lot of effort and a lot of work. And I just really think it's building that excitement. And not only building that excitement, I think, Andrea, you had mentioned it, it's being nimble because things are going to change. In 3 years, like transformation is a long time. And in 3 years, external environment's going to change, internal environment, your portfolio could change, people come along, opportunities come along. You need to sit back and listen. So this is what I've been told as well, from a coaching perspective. When you're in a position of power, you need to listen more. That's what you need to do. And you really need to observe and absorb all of that information and then together make that transformational leap. So it really is about building that excitement and moving people forward.
All right. So I've worked in healthcare. I was then in sort of government, and now I'm in financial services. And that looks like I'm a little distracted. But I think the common themes has been really around change, leadership, and transformation. And I'm attracted to sort of those kinds of opportunities, right? How do you kind of move a cat to a dog? And so, people, lots of books out there, set a vision, and, communicate all the time and, do all of this. So there's lots of, kind of good themes that we could all rehash. But I think to get a little bit more tactical on the communication piece and sort of setting the vision is it's actually just really hard work, right? It's, people think of communication, they just think, I will go give lots of speeches at town halls and people will feel my passion and will go forth and transform. And that never really happens. So I've learned about sort of how do you map out your stakeholders, do an analysis of them, and then set a plan. I mean, it sounds really tactical, but it's just, who are your key stakeholders? Well, they're people who have resources that you need. They're people who can approve. They're people who can block. They're people who can influence other people who are on that list. And usually people who own a key process or piece of work, right? And so those are your folks. And if there's a continuum of sort of support that looks at, I'm so excited about this, I can barely sleep at night, to over my dead body, will this happen? Where are they on that spectrum? And where do you need them to be? Because I think the other thing is we think we need everyone as being fully supportive, and that's actually not true. A lot of people, if they were neutral, you'd be good, right? You don't need to sell that. They don't need to be, I'm so excited I can't. They just need to kind of get a little bit further this way. And then really for each of those sort of stakeholders, what's the plan or the influence to get them to where they need to be on that? And it's like not at all sexy. It's just it's like a lot of work. And then you go back and then when you finish it all, it's still not over. You got to go back and do it again. And so there's a lot of, I just feel like it's people talk about it in these sort of big, aspirational terms, but it's grunt work, a lot of it, and it's being really purposeful. But it's also, it works, right? People want to be, that care. I care about you. I want to understand what your interests are and how I can help you with that. And I think that's the biggest lever, is people.
And I think just to add to that, when it does come together, then it's magical, right? Mm-hmm. Then the transformation really starts to take off and happen.
Yeah.
I want to pick up on the magic. There is magic that happens when you move in shared purpose and create shared vision. And there are, in my mind, and the space I'm in is across organizations, not within, across. And how you think about strategy and shared purpose is common and emergent. Because if you think of across health and social care in Ontario as an example, individual organizations, each with their own mission, vision, strategic priorities, staff. So it's like this, like this, like this. But if you think about Ontario and our priorities, it's this. So I've been thinking a lot about, so what does that mean for shared purpose and what are the levers? And it's building on a lot of what we have said. The first is one of the biggest mistakes health systems make, or any of us can make, is shame and blame. When we point fingers and blame, I don't know how that is a case for change. But we often use shame and blame for the case for change. And so one of the seismic shifts that has to take place, and we've talked about it today, is how you build on our strength. And there is not a single person I have ever worked with, from what we call resistors to early adopters, who can't work from a place of strength when we listen and learn what's important and build on their strengths. The other is thinking about organizational mission and letting it go to thinking about shared purpose, which brings a bunch of organizations with organizations together in shared purpose. So we think about Ontario health teams right now. I don't understand how an Ontario health team will create an integrated population-based model until you have a shared purpose, until people are working together to achieve it, which means you have to move from, this is the other lever, from egocentric to eco-centric. And it's not a shame and blame or an armchair critic to say egocentric, but where is the place for organization and self-organization in a system that's trying to be more joined up? We have to think of ourselves in our context, which is moving to the eco. And so what are the new skills and competencies we need to drive shared purpose across, to move from ego to eco, to move from shame and blame to building on our strengths? And how do we move and, to new and emergent roles? Some people have heard, and this isn't a criticism, kind of the plethora of project managers in the system who sometimes we take a technical approach to change. What's the project? Who's doing what? How are we reporting on it? What are our indicators? That's great. There's a place for it. But when project management or a technical approach drives change, we're not able to move change. It's the technical to support the relational change, which we've all talked about, is when you invest in relationships and you hear what's important and you can move forward, you move as a collective. And so that moves from organizational impact to collective impact, where we move together and we are stronger together. And we move from individual leadership to our collective leadership. And I think what you've heard from all of us is however we take space to help with this process, it's because we come at it in a collective leadership place. And the final place is buy-in doesn't work. So if any of us create a strategy or a vision and look to get buy-in, it usually stops pretty soon. But when you make investors, where you co-create the strategy, what's important? Last week, I was in Dufferin and Caledon, and for the very first time across 100% of their health and social care organizations, we brought together all the frontline staff, all of them. And the first question I asked is, are you meeting someone new today? 100% of the room put their hand up. Yet they work beside each other. They have the same clients. They have common missions and visions in their organizations, but none of them are working together. So how we look at co-creating the answers together, and that entire room of 150 amazing human beings have the answers. They've never been given the opportunity, maybe in the organization, but never across an entire system. And so how we fundamentally shift and think about, I think, are some of the most important.
Oh, I love this every time. I don't really feel like there's much that I can add to that. I love that naturally we kind of go from the tactical to kind of pulling out and across organizations. So I think the panel has done a brilliant job taking us through the topic, and whether we choose to stay on that or not is up to the group. So I lost where Rebecca was. Oh, she's way back there. I was like, I'm following your finger, but I don't see her. Rebecca, I'm going to ask Rebecca and Katie to kind of man a mic. Hopefully you're all better at it than I am. Woman a mic there. Thank you. Nice call out. It's red, but it will be green, I promise, when it reaches your hands. Okay, so we're going to open it up for audience questioning. Anything is fair game. You can either pose it to the panel and we can see who wants to field it, or if you have a question for someone in particular, please do. And we'll try to do our best. We have quite a bit of time. So we had budgeted half an hour for this. We were a little bit late starting, but unless people's tummies get super grumbly, we'll kind of go till about 6:45. Thanks for shoving it back in my face because I'm forgetting that it's there. No. Okay, so there was a question in the middle here, so let's start there. And then Katie and Rebecca, I'll kind of look to you to try to keep track of, I know, we might just have to yell. Oh, see, you're better than me. I heard it for a minute.
Hi, thanks for that great discussion.
Oh, also, please tell us your name and introduce yourself. Okay. You can pick a random fact or whatever you want. But...
Okay, I'm Lou Rodriguez. I work at the Provincial System Support Program at CAMH. A lot of what you shared today has been really helpful. I'm in a new role, newly created Manager of Innovation. I'm a year in. I'm embarrassed to say I still don't know what that is. So it's been great to hear some tips on how to create like a shared vision around something new. My question is actually about ambition. Have you ever felt embarrassed or maybe been made to feel embarrassed about your ambition? And I'm also assuming that you are ambitious, or just describe yourselves that way. But if you're not, then maybe just tell me what your relationship is to that word.
Who, me?
Such a great question.
Brilliant.
I can start. I think there's always this sense that, as a woman, you want to make other people feel comfortable. Like that's sort of, you lead with like, oh, I hope everyone else is comfortable with whatever's happening. And if I'm too ambitious, that might kind of set them off. So you don't want to kind of come at it that way. But yeah, you kind of are ambitious. So it's kind of a tension that sort of needs to be managed all the time. I had a circumstance, so, and being at the bank is sort of interesting in this because you would think that, it's a big, private sector company. Maybe people treat ambition a little bit differently. Maybe they do a little bit, but actually not so much. I had a number of additional portfolios that were added to my role about a year after I started. And I went and I talked to HR and I said, I think you need to pay me more. It's one thing, my salary was frozen for ages when I was in the public sector, but I'm not there anymore. So I don't expect that to happen.
Do it for the rest of us.
And what's career growth look like? And, what kind of, how does this sort of work? And HR said to me, well, you can talk to, the senior executive, but just want to caution you, people, they kind of don't like it if you sort of seem like you're too ambitious, sort of, going out there. And so I had a conversation, which I thought I was being quite careful. And it came around back to me and said, they thought, that if you don't get what you want, you're going to leave. And I thought, how did I leave with that impression? Like I was so careful and cautious about how I was handling this. And so I said, no, that wasn't the intention. It was just, really trying to be honest about what, what the growth looked like, what the compensation looked like. And so nothing more was said about it. And a month later, they gave me a 25% increase. And so it's just this odd kind of thing, right? Where it's just like everyone's uncomfortable. But if I hadn't created that, it wouldn't have happened either, right? So I guess I would say be comfortable with feeling super uncomfortable because I think it's the only way you're going to be able to get what you need.
I think, so for what it's worth, my definition of ambition is just the pursuit of a goal. Sometimes that goal is professional. Sometimes it's not. Often, for those who know me, it's often professional. And so I'm never embarrassed of my ambition. So this is my second child. And it's relevant because when I had my first child, many of you will have heard this, mat leave is not my jam. Neither is pregnancy. I just... I love my son, but if you could just fast forward and give me a 1-year-old, I'm sure a lot of women would probably sign up for that. Good to know. And so for me, I like the outcome, not the process, but I love all the 15, 3. It never gets better. So the happiest day of my life was when I went back to work after my first child. And so I know after the second, I'm going to take 6 months. And everyone's like, take longer if you need. I'm like, no, that's long enough. I'm good. But I actually, I became more ambitious after I had my son. And I wasn't embarrassed about that. But what I will say is that there were situations I was in, and this is not one of them, where I felt vulnerable admitting that. And I think, I often say when I'm in a room of powerful women, I'm like, you guys are my people. So maybe one of the reasons I didn't like mat leave is because when I talked about going back to work early or being effing pumped that my kid was starting daycare, and other parents would say, oh, and I'm like, no, this is a great thing that someone else is going to entertain him all day because I am not fun. That I would feel guilty and vulnerable about admitting the ambition that I had. So I couldn't tell you what it is that makes me comfortable with it. That's just who I am. And sometimes it's the point that people tease me about that. Of course, I'm the person who gets a new job and then is already looking to the next one. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean it's always been comfortable. And the older I get, recognizing that I have a long way to go, the more comfortable I get just owning that part of me. And it's also easy when you're around like-minded women who balance motherhood with their careers. But again, to loop back, it's just the pursuit of a goal, and that goal will shift over time. It can be professional. It can be that you are spending time to invest in your family, and that's fine, because all of those pieces make up the collective you at the end of the day.
Can I say? I was just going to. You sure?
Yes.
I was going to segue from your comments, Laura, because I was born in Jamaica, and my parents came with my whole family to Toronto for one or two reasons. Express that they always talked about when I was a kid. One, so that you could have access to the best education, and not because it's going to buy you something, but it's other than choice and the excitement of learning. And the second thing was for our health system. And I would say that I've always been goal oriented. My dad used to make us write down our 3 goals for the year. I'm talking from JK onward. And they were things like, but he wasn't militant about it. He was just, if you write it down, it'll come true. Like it was a wish. And over time, as I got older, I realized it's not, the wish is in me. I can make that thing happen. And it built a lot of confidence, but not in a competitive way. I'm not competitive with anyone other than myself. Mm-hmm. But I do every year often set goals for myself, and I write them down. And my son would attest to the fact that I did the same thing with my children, just helping them understand it's good to feel purposeful. Mm-hmm. So I am committed to my own happiness unequivocally. I'm Jamaican, a Black woman, and Sagittarius. That bundle just makes me committed to my own happiness. And if you're committed to your own happiness and your family's happiness and your friends, then you are driven to only be engaged in things that make you excited about being alive. And I would say that's just me. I don't want to waste 1 minute in something that's unpleasant or not satisfying, filling my soul, basically.
I want to build on that. The question around ambition, I think, took a lot of courage, because it's not an easy journey for us when we do have a sense of where we want to go. And I don't mean it in terms of position. I mean it in terms of kind of the vessel by which we have to make impact, and what comes through us to make something really meaningful that matters to us and to other people and to our children and our families and etc. But it's not easy. And, Jocelyn's in the room, wave. She's from the Change Foundation. I want to work with amazing human beings, and I want to help support every single person I work with to thrive. But that means across, and this is going to sound crazy, Ontario and beyond. And that's my aspiration. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know why, but it's real. So I work for Kathy Fuchs, the CEO, who gave me permission to take space in new power ways, to be at the front of change, and I've only ever supported from behind the scenes. Like, I've walked around the room and a bunch of folks said, I've seen your name and I've seen your picture. Yeah, because, and I don't care about that, but I do care about, for the first time in my career, moving from a support role to helping lead change, and to do it in a way that is democratized, that is equitable, that supports people to be engaged. And if I can do something about that, I'm really going to, but it's not easy, because old power holds power and directs change. And Ontario is no different than many places in the world. We have a lot of people who function from an old power place, hold power and direct change. I want to help democratize power and change and share it. So sometimes people in old power will say, why are you out in front and not your CEO? What right do you have to write a daily blog from the national health system that comes out across the world? Or little things that some people will want to hold you back from aspiration. And I don't think it's personal to me. They don't know me. But it does come up against how we move positive change. And if I wasn't so clear on my aspiration, and if I didn't have 25 years under my belt of taking a lot of, ups and downs, my own performance gremlins, my own imposter syndrome, et cetera, to get to a place where I am today, where many of you are in this room who we work together in shared purpose. We have each other's back. We could have the conversation like, you screwed up, and I don't believe that, or this is amazing, let's keep going. I wouldn't be able to continue to work in shared purpose because some of those noises. But when you know why you're doing what you're doing, if you really believe in it, it's not for the faint of heart, but aspiration matters. So I love the question.
And just to build on that, you had said, I don't even know what the manager of innovation means, and talk about aspiration. It's something that you can build on what that means, really. That's building right. Your own future. It doesn't have to be given to you. You can create something completely new and really inspire other people. Yeah. So I just love that fact that, you're sitting here trying to find yourself, but you can create your own vision. Yeah. You can create your own future.
Hello, my name's Kim Stewart. I'm with Hub International, which is an insurance broker. I've been with them for my entire career, but most recently took on a VP role in leading healthcare programs, so for doctors, optometrists, physiotherapists, across the board. One of the things I find as a leader is I am extremely passionate. And I feel that sometimes that passionate lens is seen more from a male-viewed space as emotional and not driven. So I'd love to hear some opportunities where the panel has come up against that, because I need a little bit of help.
I'll tackle that question quickly. Yes, I'm very passionate. I'm Italian, so I use my hands a lot. I knock things around me all the time in board meetings. People know to stay clear. Like you were talking about being at the end. I sit at the end on purpose. I was actually told by a coach, stop using your hands, but I can't. I'm just a passionate person. And if people think that's emotional, well, I think what you're hearing is you can't create these mental models or these imposter syndromes and self-talk yourself. I don't care. That's who I am. You either accept it or don't.
I think there's a misunderstanding about how my view is that passion is not unidimensional. And I, honest to goodness, I think if there has been something I've been intentional about, it's how I communicate in different circumstances around different topics. I'm very intentional. So my passion can sometimes come out as extreme, quiet, confident, persistent debate. You wouldn't even know if I was burning inside or wanting to reach across the table and choke the life out of the person I'm talking to. You'd never know it, because I am so purposeful in what the end game has to be, so excited about it perhaps that I don't want to play that hand, and I will be just like warm but ice. At other times, the topic can be so dry that I know I've got to excite people. Then I will use humor or, hands, and I'll see people following my hands, but it's okay because now they're sort of just a little excited, but I don't know what she's talking about, but I want to kind of do that. And at other times I would say, sometimes a passion, like something that you are just feeling that you're not heard about, requires a one-on-one conversation that humanizes that thing for that person. And I find it's back to the shades of green. I find sometimes someone gets confused by, why do you care so much about that? Let me take you for coffee and explain why it is. And if that thing is about you, wrong answer, right? It's never about you. At least I don't think anyone up here or anybody in the room's really, when you think about it, driven for yourself. And I think people need to understand what is behind that passion. Because, yes, I think women can be misinterpreted sometimes in their passion as aggressive. But if you listen carefully and observe, bad behavior happens on the other side of that table 9 times out of 10. But it's just women are typically demure about it. I wouldn't be.
I wonder though too, because I think you mentioned CEOs and senior leaders. It's 80% social emotional intelligence. So we're emotional beings. So you're emotional. Good.
Yeah.
Right. It's are you appropriately emotional? You're breaking down crying in the middle of a meeting, or yelling at your coworkers and cursing them, or laughing hysterically when the boss is talking. Those are inappropriate emotions, right? But, I think, for us to be comfortable with, we are our emotional selves at work. And I think what you said, it's like, what do you choose to employ at any given point in time, given the circumstance?
The soft skills are the hard skills. And I'm been really working on how we understand that, because often we are told that those are nice, but let's make change. And you have to be able to touch the heart before you can move the mind. And so how people experience us, I think, is important. And we have to be authentic. So, what Andrea says is really true. Our emotional intelligence around how we're experienced, at least our awareness about it, is really important. Because if we don't understand the impact we have, or we don't seek to understand, for instance, and I don't know the circumstance, sometimes it's flipping it to seek to understand where a response and reaction is coming from. And it's continuing to learn how we have influence, but be very, very authentic. And so I know there's a couple pieces that I said there, but one is the soft skills are the hard skills, building on the percentages. How we are experienced, I think us having an awareness and seeking to understand helps us grow and develop. I'm always asking. I think Jocelyn's smiling because there isn't a day I haven't asked, what do you think? How do you think I was experienced? How did you experience me? Because I always want to be on this reflective journey to be able to have the kind of impact that matters to me. But it is an important piece because we need to be whole and we need to be able to take equitable space with other colleagues.
Go to this side of the room. Maybe all the way at the back, because I feel like people at the back never get to ask questions. Is there a question? Yeah. Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
You with the glasses.
Oh, no.
Doesn't really
Thank you. I'm not really sure what I'm going to say. My name's Aruna Mitra, and hi, Jacki. I'm back in Ontario. I'm with the Central West Lynn, and really appreciating the job that you're doing up in Dufferin with our group. Appreciate that. I guess I'm sort of wanting to hear about how to lead within a specific context, which is, I think, is what's happening now in Ontario. And that is that there's a lot of transformation happening, a lot of different messages, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of posturing, positioning. People are kind of getting into their little lane about where am I going to end up and who am I going to be. And it's a really uncomfortable place for a lot of us to be. And I just by way of little diversion, I've moved from Alberta 2.5 years ago, having moved from Ontario into a system that I thought was amazingly integrated and really forward thinking. And a huge change happened, and it was again this uncertainty and this discomfort, and people were positioning, and the system completely changed. So now I've come back to Ontario, so I feel like I'm kind of Drake for some reason. I'm bringing all this chaos, I think. I want to hear about your guys' experience around being a leader in that context to support other people around you, because what I'm witnessing is panic in a lot of my colleagues, and a sort of a frantic sense of not really knowing where the land is, and not really knowing what to hold on to, and feeling that sense of how is this actually going to work, like really focusing on the details and being really worried about all of the details about this. You talk about this cross continuum. You know, we're very used to our little silos. That's how we were all raised and how we grew up. And so when we talk about cross the silos and maybe breaking down those silos, it makes people really, really frightened. I'm just wondering if any of you have any experience and want to share thoughts around that.
Okay, I'll start. So we're going through huge change. The establishment of Ontario Health and the changing of a number of provincial agencies and a provincial policy around Ontario health teams. And it would be very common to feel paralyzed and to not be clear on where you have an opportunity to lead. And my perspective is a provocative one, but I believe it at the bottom of my heart. There, you have to be aware of what you have control over and what you don't. But we have a lot that we have control over, which is how we lead, no matter where. And when I talk about lead, I mean leaderful. I don't mean people in positions of leadership. Wherever we're at, we have an opportunity to work across. We have an opportunity to start to make positive change that's within our control in our own organizations and across organizations. And maybe that seems naive, but I don't think it is. So I want to give you an example. Anyone from primary care in Ontario? Am I okay?
You're good.
Okay. Oh. Anyone here from primary care in Ontario? Okay, a couple of us. So primary care in Ontario has the Association of Family Health Teams, the Ontario College of Family Physicians, OMA and Section 7 of General Practice, Nurse Practitioners of Ontario, yakety yak. Okay, you got all these organizations. In Ontario's history, primary care has not been able to come together in a unified voice. But right now, with all the system change that is happening in Ontario, and where primary care maybe have been blamed, maybe are tired, maybe feel the brunt of a lot of change, are coalescing in shared purpose and actually defining for themselves where they believe they could have the highest impact and what's within their control to change. That is one of the critical sectors that has an opportunity to coalesce, come together, and lead. They're doing that in a time with all this change and where they could feel that a health system reform is happening to them. The point is, we all have an opportunity where we can control to make positive change. And I'm not saying it's not difficult, and I'm not being naive to how that change impacts all of us. We don't need to be paralyzed by it, and it doesn't have to create some of the negativity because we get to choose how we lead. That's my first thought.
Just one note, and then I'm going to pass the mic over to Andrea because I know she has another engagement that she needs to get to. I just think it's interesting to reflect on the similarities in this question with the similarities of the first question, and kind of that vulnerability you feel when you're like, will someone just tell me what to do or what's going on here? And that it takes a lot more courage to be in a position where you say, all right, like no one's telling me what to do. So why don't I just take stock of what I have control over, what motivates me, and what I can do from where I am in the absence of any direction, which is a terrifying thing, easy for me to say, especially when we're thinking about system change, but worth reflecting. Andrea, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, thanks. And I was like writing her little like love notes. The Ontario Health Board is having a dinner at 6:30. I said I'd be there by 7, but it's in Yorkville. And I see 12 hands. So I want to just say, I guess, a couple things before I leave. One is that leadership is never more valuable than in times of ambiguity. And whether you're an official leader or you can just show leadership with members of your team, if you can, this is the time. Sort of pull up your socks and kind of do it. The second, I feel obligated to say, as a board member of Ontario Health, is that this is a frequent topic of discussion at our committee meetings and at the board meeting. Is there's a lot of empathy and recognition for the impact of change on people, and not just on not on the patients and the communities, but really on the people in the health system, and a real desire and motivation to provide clarity as soon as possible, right? And so I don't, I think if I leave with nothing else is to say, we got it, we understand, we have the ability to operate, I think, as you said, within the parameters that we're given to try to make clarity happen as soon as absolutely possible. But it is a group of people who are empathetic and caring and aware and driven to really make sure that all of the people who work in the health system, who are just the guts of it, are able to feel like they can be their best selves and really provide the care that's needed. So
kind of comes back full circle to we're competent and we've got you.
We're
just scale that up to a higher committee level.
Exactly.
But I won't make you go awkward by giving you a round of applause, but I will give you an opportunity to head out.
Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you for being here. And then I'll similarly, if Jacki or Elena, you have
I just wanted to add that I think change occurs. Yes. Change occurs at the speed of trust. And I really think that thinking of Ontario Health teams and having the opportunity to sit in collaborations and meet with amazing groups. And last night we had a primary care engagement session. We had over 70 physicians come and really talk about that shared purpose. It's building that trust that I think is really important. And that's sort of going to drive the change. And the fact that we're all in it together, not really knowing, trust is so important when uncertainty is really at the horizon.
I'd like to say briefly that after 6 years on mat leave and no paid employment, I'm going to actually remind Aruna Mitra of what I learned from her many, many years ago on this very topic. And the importance of standing as still as possible as leaders when everything around you is moving at the speed of light. It's such an important obligation and commitment to make to the people you're serving, whether that's patients or your teams of providers or staff. You, as the leader, has to stand still. And you're standing in a place of pure optimism and excitement, regardless of what you're feeling, because the fact of the matter is you will feel that optimism and excitement. But more importantly, everyone needs you to be still. And that's the thing that I live by. Basically, leadership isn't about me and how I'm feeling. It's about how I choose to show up to serve the people that are relying on me to make it a calm space.
That was a perfect way to wrap things up. Please don't give me daggers, because there's a bar and there's food, and so we can continue the conversation. So I'm gonna pass the mic over to Karima, but as I do, I just want to, on the note of a calm space, request that often in these sorts with these sorts of events, the tendency is to like crash the stage and talk to the panelists. Although, you can form a line and I'll talk to you too. But all that to say, if you could just give them a moment to kind of, collect their thoughts, not have to speak for 2 seconds, and then everyone will kind of join the conversation. So help yourself to food, help yourself to a drink, But I don't think there's no obligation to say, but I don't think any of them are running at the door to a 7 o'clock commitment. So you're not going to lose their attention. But that being said, I'll pass the mic over to Karima.
So let's start with a good round of applause for our amazing panel this evening. You know, we started the discussion this evening, and I said today was about learning about courage, the courage to step into the gray and to be able to shine the light. And I really want to thank our panel today for inspiring all of us with the wisdom of how to embrace those opportunities for change, how to be effective in trying to unite organizations and trying to define what is common purpose. We have heard your message and the importance of things like following while you lead, listening while you speak, and all of those things to help build bridges of trust in times that are really uncertain so that we can all move forward together. Hopefully, we're going to be able to now all take this away and apply these principles in what we're all doing in the parts that we play in our healthcare system to be able to design and develop the future of the health system for our province. We have great company today, and we have good food and drink outside. So we do hope we'll all stay for the networking hour so that we can continue this conversation started off by this wonderful and esteemed panel of speakers today. Thank you so much.
Get right to the bar.